Okay, we're live. Hi, folks, and welcome to episode number 3 of AI Investigation Power Hour. Today, we're joined by Leo, founder and CEO of Graphistry, and Dave Harold out of Databricks. So, before we go deeper in talking about Leo and Dave, we're just going to mention something that's happening both for the Graphistry and the Louis team. So we got RSAC coming up, and we do our own one-day Graph the Planet conference. Where Anchain AI is one of the sponsors, and Dave, you're going to present, I believe.
I
Or
will. I'll be there
yeah,
presenting. Yeah, I
yeah.
can't wait. Yeah, gonna talk about connecting some old world security stuff with some new world security AI stuff.
Oh, that's going to be awesome. So if folks listening in want to watch that, you can either, if you're in San Francisco, you can register and be there in person, or you can follow the online live stream if you're way over in Europe, as I am. We also do some virtual trainings, both for EU and US time zones. So you can also check that out over at louis.ai. So, since our last episode, Leo went to B-Sides in Seattle and presented, and I went to NDC Security in Oslo. And Leo, you got a conference coming up this Friday in Atlanta. You want
Yeah,
to talk
it's
a little bit
the
about that?
that's the it's called an AFCA National Security Conference. So that's going to be turning up the notch one maybe a couple of levels on that one.
So great. So yeah, that was the short intro. So Dave, who
Well,
is Dave?
yeah. Well, I mean, since we're doing what's coming up, I'll say that Databricks will be at RSA as well, and so we will our founder and CEO will be doing a keynote. And if you'd like to come and meet with any of our executives or founders, if you're a CISO, we have some CISO events as well. So yeah, please come to the booth and say hi. It's our first time at RSA for Databricks, and so we're hoping to meet a lot of new folks.
So you're going to be on like the expo floor
We
for
we'll have a booth. Yep, absolutely. In addition to all those other events. So
so
And I think you said you'd be a bit earlier that you'd be floating around B-sides over the weekend as well, right?
yeah, I'll be at B-Sides SF, which I think has become one of my favorite events of the year. See so many good friends there, and then Monday we'll be at I'll be at Graph the Planet, which I'm looking
yeah.
forward to, and then a full week at RSA.
It's always a little different that month in San Francisco, so that's great.
Yeah, I'll be going for my first time. Second time in San Francisco, but first time here. So like, I
Last
think
last year there was a goat, so we'll see what what's next on the conference floor.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be cool. So yeah, Dave, um, you work at Databricks, and
I
you've been there
do.
for like almost a year now.
Yeah. Yeah, about 8 or 9 months. Yeah, so I joined Databricks in July of last year, and yeah, my title at Databricks is head of cybersecurity in our go-to-market organization. So, yes, it's actually quite a bit of more salesy job than I've had in the past. I'm just adjusting to that. Mostly, I've been more of a technical leader. But before I was at Databricks, I worked at Google for a few years as a field engineering team in their Chronicle SecOps product area. Before that, I worked at Splunk for a number of years, again, doing kind of field research and field enablement, just kind of working with customers. And then before that, I ran security programs. So,
Yeah, and we're
Yeah,
going to
I
touch
think it
on.
was, sorry, go
Yeah,
for
so
it.
yeah, we're going to touch a bit on what you did at Splunk because that's been helpful for us, and we're going to touch on that later on in the episode. A
great.
teaser for folks, but it's something about being a boss.
I think Dave, like when you were before, like so when you were kind of more hands-on, you were doing both cyber but also fraud, or did I misremember that? Like I think somehow
Um, it kind of depends on the industry, whether, I've found it, and definitely finding that here, of whether, fraud is something that, your cyber team kind of takes ownership over versus, sometimes it's finance, sometimes it's in a certain line of business. I've definitely helped a lot on fraud use cases for financial companies. I worked in the payments industry, so we had a little bit of anti-fraud. We were a gateway, so a lot of that happened more downstream from us or upstream at the processor. But when I was at Splunk, I helped some gaming companies do some really cool in-game anti-fraud stuff, and so yeah, it's definitely near and dear to my heart.
Awesome.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you've seen a lot of data then.
Yeah, it's I think over the past 15 years, that would be a good just sort of definition of my life is security data analysis. Yeah.
Yeah, you've handled petabytes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Petabytes
It'd be funny if,
before your
like,
eyes.
It'd be funny if like each person had like a little counter of just how many log lines they've stared at in their year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Well, I mean, it's crazy to me how many customers you see now, or organizations who are ingesting 3, 4, 500 terabytes a day.
yeah.
And it's just shocking, right? That, I mean, just to think back even a couple of years ago, that would have been maybe unheard of, and now it's relatively common, at least from my vantage point.
Yeah, it would basically just be like the top banks handling all transactions.
Yeah.
They would have that amount of data, but like people didn't even process their network logs because they couldn't ingest it or store it or anything, but that's changed a lot. We have a lot more data at hand.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It's okay. We asked this question to our guests. So everything's changed. We're not just writing code and looking at logs. We're talking about it. So what's been like your most memorable AI experience like?
Yeah. Well, I was just joking with a friend how like security people like kind of always begin their talks with saying like, well, I was a skeptic of AI. It's almost like an obligatory like introduction, right? And for good reason, right? I think there's like for a generation or so, you kind of had to protect yourself against some of the messaging and the constant hype cycle around new things. But then, I think the thing that kind of like cemented it for me, honestly, was well, I was sitting there yesterday thinking, when was that? Like, it must have been 3 years ago. And no, it was 2 years ago. And then I started looking online, and it was 10 months ago that I started seeing this flurry of social media around this old thing that, well, it's not old, it's still happening at Splunk. They just did it for the 10th year, but it was around some data that we had released around 10 years ago from this thing called Boss of the SOC. And it was Leo and the team had actually used some data that we published to, we had published it in hopes that analysts would use it to help train themselves and become better investigators. But Leo found that, and I'm glad that we open sourced it, because researchers like Leo and the team found it and said, hey, we can actually use that to sort of judge the performance of an AI and use it as eval data.
Yeah.
And I'm looking back, and I think that's about as good a moment as any for me of when I had an aha moment around AI.
That actually resonates with me because often when we're working with the team, you can hear about, I don't really care if it's like, GPU graph visualizations where you could look at all your data, AI that you could automate, whatever the claim is of the year, right? And like, we're guilty as that as anyone, right? So I'm not like,
I mean, look, I work at a vendor, so yeah.
Yeah. But at the same time, like one of the magic moments I always love is when, ignore the marketing. At some point, there's generally a kernel of truth to stuff, right? Otherwise there wouldn't be so much activity. And then somebody tries on their own data and they're like, oh, wait, I could see my stuff. Or, oh, wait, that thing was really annoying, that last incident. And now you could just talk to it. You're like, wait a minute. So Boss of the SOC, like what you just said there, like that resonates with me on so many levels.
Yeah. I had my, that moment was basically 2 years ago when Leo showed me Louis the first time, and it worked. And suddenly, while I was testing it and Leo showing it to me, it dropped from GPT-4 to GPT 3.5 and everything broke. It's like, okay, so there's been a big shift with the models. Okay, so now it actually works. That was like this is viable. This could happen. So
that
was
Dave,
cool.
Sorry, go for it.
Yeah, I think one thing that I always remember is, I think about security investigation, and I do think of it as an art. And I think that's one of the reasons why we invested so much time in training people, because it takes a lot of time in the seat and all that. But I think a few months ago I was playing with an AI sort of, agentic chat agent kind of mix, and had access to a lot of security data. And somebody here was like, "Hey, what questions should I ask?" And I was like, "Well," I started like asking questions, and then I just said, pretend, or take on the persona of Chris Sanders, who's a really sort of renowned investigator and trainer of investigators, and a student of the human mind, like in the investigative setting, right? And I said, take on the persona of Chris, and you tell me the questions to ask, right? And it started listing these amazing like investigative questions, right? Around, and it was everything from estimating, sort of, whether an incident was contained, estimating, or, advising based on a rubric whether we should declare an incident. It said like, hey, should I prepare an update for a technical audience, prepare an update for your legal team? And, this just huge sort of list of questions and all this stuff just at my fingertips. And I would say, okay, that was a further confirmation for me. I was like, okay, I know that this is extremely valuable in security now.
Yeah, you might enjoy this. Was so we look at evals a lot, and I'm hoping we're going to talk about that more in the conversation today. One of the ones that was fun for us was that so we're looking at like, bots or boss of the SOC is one of the data sets we like to eval against. And I was like, well, not focusing on a persona. Like I was always curious, like Bruce Schneier, what we get Bruce Schneier to do. But like I read a post, somebody was like, oh, well, if you do planning methodologies like Oscar or OODA loop, that might help. And I was like, well, let me just put it in and not even say what it is. And maybe that's enough. Just the AI knows like IR methodology. And that was actually enough to see lift. Like you don't even have to define it, just use it.
I love it.
Yeah, it's just, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah. I'm thinking Pickerel right now.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on. Coming from Graphistry, we love graphs.
Yeah.
And we've used Databricks to create a lot of graphs, basically, in our product. So from Databricks perspective, like what's a small or what's a big graph?
Yeah. This was a good question. And I was kind of thinking about it, and for me, a big graph is sort of representing, everything about an environment that you're trying to secure. So, every network connection, every DNS lookup, every network login, every bit of potentially every bit of telemetry, or certainly a lot of like endpoint telemetry and things like that. And that could be, billions of nodes and things like that, right? Which we can handle that in Databricks pretty well, but when it comes to visualizing it, right? I think when you hit that level, that's where tools like Graphistry and your performance, your sort of GPU, accelerated performance come in. But I think on the smaller side, sorry, I took those out of order, but on the smaller side, graphs are incredibly useful. Even in the context of a single incident, we might be thinking about just maybe a handful of machines, or maybe maybe it could be more, right? Than more than a handful. But I think in those cases, and it's something that I'll probably mention later, I think having a graph view of certain data is just such a natural way to look at it. And I actually think that a lot of what we might call investigator intuition is actually the human brain doing graph analysis in some way, and visualizing connections. And so, I think it's extremely powerful. I really liked the presentation from Graph the Planet by John Lambert last year.
I was just thinking that you said that. That was
and
exactly
when he talked about his algebras of defense, and in graph being one of those, and certainly a first class sort of technique, in my opinion, around data analysis.
Yeah, it took me a while to get mentally there, which is kind of ironic given the company name and everything. But it's like when we think about logs and stuff, like kind of your first comments, like, okay, as soon as you have events are basically edges. That's like, and so cool. You have infinite edges, and that's Databricks is great at infinite edges, basically.
Yeah.
But then from like an incident view, or like from like a database modeling view, like the Neo4j guys are actually really good at describing it this way, where they say, okay, cool, you have all your tables. So we have all, log table 1, 2, 3, you have all your infinite events. But the interesting thing is, like, when they connect to each other, it's like the relationships across them. And so I need a pivot because I need to go from an IP in this table to that one. And this becomes, and basically from a database view, that becomes about your foreign key relationships.
Right.
And no team spends most of their time generally thinking about foreign key relationships in databases. Right. Like, that's like, but you think about it, but that's not like, well, when you're in an investigator mindset, it's about, those overlapping sensors and making like, and tracking, like, the footsteps in the snow as like that story connects. And so,
I mean, it's such a more natural, like, way for the human brain to sort of visualize it, right? A connection. I get it. And yeah, you have to be, fairly articulate in data to like talk about foreign keys and joins, and much less understanding like performance implications of doing those things. Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, I went on and looked up John Lambert's talk from last year, so I'll post that in the comments on the live.
So somebody from his group will be at Graph the Planet this year. So Diana, so he gave a very high-level talk last year, and I actually got recently a sneak peek of actually what's brewing inside of Microsoft CISO office to actually make that stuff real. And so I don't know how much Diana's going to be sharing at Graph the Planet, but she's actually like flipping it from theory to like, okay, here's what it starts to actually look like. So that's actually kind of, if you're live streaming or whatever, that's going to be a fun session.
Cool. Okay, so security graphs in Databricks, and given that you work security, they're like, what's it like in your day-to-day, like working with that? Yeah,
I mean, honestly, we see kind of a mix. We see a lot of folks who are like, hey, Databricks is a security lake house, a security lake, but we call it a lake house because we turn it into sort of a data warehouse on top of a lake. So it's high performance and all that, but it has this one very powerful characteristic in that it's very inexpensive compared to certain alternatives. And so, so we end up getting a lot of people like, hey, is this less expensive? Right. And then, often we are, and that, that's wonderful for everyone. But, I think then you turn around and say, well, what can we now do with that data? And so, there's a lot of AI, a lot of agentic stuff that we can do. But I think, graphs are extremely important as far as, taking that data and maybe doing some ETL, extracting out your entities, extracting your users, applications, all the other kind of node-like things. And, in Databricks, I've seen this implemented a lot with graph frames where, you have a big delta table, which is a construct in Databricks or in Spark, a big delta table of nodes and a big delta table of edges. And then you can sort of express, graph style queries, motifs, detection mechanisms. And, honestly, like, I feel like that's an area where I want to do a lot of work over the next year is say, hey, here's some prescribed ways or some ways to build some of those graphs and then to turn around and use them in your detections. And, I think when you get a big graph, like we were mentioning earlier, becomes pretty apparent pretty quickly, the value of something, like graphistry. So,
yeah. But this is like, and you've been in security for a long time now. So
yeah, 30 years now.
30 years. Okay. That's
I'm in the fourth quarter of my career. Let's put it that way.
So, but like, how have you seen a big shift there? Like how like how people look at data? And like, for me, like I fell in love with graphs a couple of years ago, and it's like, But as you mentioned, like investigators are basically building a graph in their mind, and like coming from the police investigation, it was sort of like an aha moment for me to start thinking in graphs.
Yeah.
So how's that like? You're over 30 years, like in data, like computer and cybersecurity. Like, what's the shift?
Yeah, I mean, well, I remember running security programs back in the day, and just struggling to keep, pretty minimal amounts of data, much less sort of do, to do sort of any kind of like real at scale like detections. And I mean, honestly, that's, I fell in love with Splunk, 15 plus years ago, like the first time I saw it, because it was the first thing that where I could put all my data,
Mm.
and also sort of this like very, very low latency search, right? And I was like, okay, this is fantastic. And like honestly, like I look back and it's like, that started a path to me going to work there and sharing that with a lot of people. I was like, look at how you can handle all this data. So I think just in general, like it is within our reach to store all the data that we think we want to. Some people are like, hey, it's more expensive, or I don't feel like that's a truth, but it's within our reach now, where I think it used to not be just to even have the data. But now we say, okay, we have all the data, and that's become, pretty, that's become achievable. And then it's like, well, okay, we can, getting back to like the algebras talk, like, can we do relational detections? Yeah, we can generally do that now. But to me, it's, obviously, kind of Captain Obvious statement of the day, but the AI frontier, right, is, like my own personal mission is like, how can I help every one of our customers, like use AI for security the very best way, and like save them from having to go through certain learning curves.
It's interesting. I was just thinking that, like, so we also see a lot of Databricks users who, often people like us when they have a lot of data and want to look at it. And so we end up into some of the more interesting accounts because of that. And often it's almost like a maturity model where it's like, I think, you might start with some pre-cloud vendor. I won't name names, but it's architected and priced differently. That's, but maybe it has a nice UX, whatever, and it's there. But then they're like, okay, maybe there's a new data source or an existing data source that, for cost reasons, it's like, okay, you start with putting it into the cloud, like, S3 buckets or whatever. Now you could do, it's cheaper to do volume stuff for that one use case. But then when you were talking about I forgot what like the Delta streams or something you're calling that. What was
Delta
that
tables. Those are
Delta,
open source format for tables inside Databricks. Yeah.
I think I'm kind of curious. Like, so the two use cases I've seen the most for, like, so okay, preface it, like when people start, like they'll just kind of do the normal event table in like their data lake or whatever, and I think that's great. Like, oh, here's the firewall logs. Like, these things are huge, right? But then the Delta tables, I think two use cases jump to mind for me. The first is actually IP translation tables, where it's like this like fast moving dynamic thing. It's like you could historically do it, but if you have like a SOAR or an enrichment or like a real time query, you kind of want that hot and moving, right? And so that's one that we see a lot. And then the other that, but that's like a sophisticated team. The other one that we're seeing a bit more is identity data, where you're like, oh, here's like the identity graph that, yes, you could have the authentication authorization logs in cold storage, but for a lot of like, it's useful to have the identity thing just for the enrichments that are going live. And I'm curious, like, are there any other sort of, like, am I misreading the situation, or like you kind of think about it differently?
No, I mean, I think those are important data sources for sure. And, identity especially, and, it's particularly well suited to graph analysis. And frankly, even if you like, we have a lot of financial services customers at Databricks. And, I don't know if you're familiar, like with the open letter that came out about some of the systemic, maybe over reliance on SaaS, like that.
Oh, is it like JPMC or something?
And
or Bank of
and
America?
a lot, it was JPMC, and a lot of that is centered around sort of OAuth and sort of relying on authentication from different platforms. And so we certainly see a lot of customers who are really interested, especially just in identity, right? Like some people say identity is the new perimeter. Like a few years ago, that was popular to say, which again, to your point earlier, I think there's a grain of truth to that, but certainly, that's an area where we see a lot of interest and use cases. But I would say, just generally, one of the really cool things in Databricks is the ability to sort of bring data in and leave it in its native format if you want to. And we have a variant type, which kind of performs equally well if that thing is a string or a JSON or whatever. If it's a JSON, you can do like cool, structured, data operations against it. But if it's not, you just do string stuff. And a lot of customers are like, hey, I'm gonna leave my data in that format. At least it's under, it's under management and access control. And then if you need to sort of extract things from it, or even if you want to get formal and kind of normalize it to, one of the schemas like OCSF or something, that's straightforward to do as well. And I think that, that's probably the thing that would best feed, some of these graph use cases, is doing some of that normalization.
I'm kind of foreshadowing a little, but that's actually one of my favorite uses of agents, where you have all these like hidden fields and like raw fields and just like nested, like imagine like a Windows event table with like XML nested 20 levels deep, and like who the heck knows what's in there. So I've been actually loving like, you can use the AI to help structure the data and ingest it cleaner, but letting the agents just like dig in there, oh my gosh.
Really I mean, normalization is a really interesting thing, right? Because SIMs, SIM tools have to varying degrees kind of prescribed that you do it, and some, do normalization. Sometimes it's like really tightly tied to performance. So like in some cases, if you don't normalize, you don't get good performance because you can't build indexes.
You can't search it. Like you press enter and you go grab a coffee and you wait to
and then some platforms are like like you literally can't get data into some platforms without normalizing it very, and I think in the AI world, it's like, models and agents are actually quite tolerant of not normalizing your data, right? They can kind of look at it and be like, oh, that's clearly the source IP address or the username or whatever. But on the other hand, right, we have other kinds of ML use cases, especially where we might want to train a model. And, some of those models are extremely intolerant of like a string in an integer field, right? Or something like that. And so, you kind of want to do that ETL step to sort of do type validation so that your training data for your model is. So I think the reasons that I was joking with a friend about parsing with a purpose. I think the reasons that we parse probably will change a little bit, but I think we'll still end up parsing a decent amount of data and security.
Yeah, I wonder what would have happened if we let AI decide the format it wanted to store things.
Sure.
Like, hey, here's a log.
You're giving me
here's a log. Optimized storage. Like, how much data would an AI actually need to store to be able to understand what's like? How much text would he need? Like,
well, I mean,
an IP address just be shortened.
Binary logging, right?
Yeah.
I was actually reading a paper last week. Maybe we could add this in the links. Was so today you have like a database, and like we can call it like Databricks a database as a gross oversimplification of like a $100 billion company. But
it's a database.
You lose track, right? After a billion here, a billion there. But what was fun was like the paper was like, well, what if the database was sort of like on the fly, that is like rebuilt per workload? And so imagine like you take, I forgot what's it called, like the Photon engine or whatever is inside of Databricks. Like, but what if it was just rewritten per workload? And like with LLMs, like, man, like I think if you think Databricks is fast today, like give it a couple of years.
Well, I give the leaders here a lot of credit for having a ton of foresight and continuing to find kind of new use cases. Security is one of them. Honestly, we're getting into security more seriously now, but I think, Leo, we mentioned this when we were chatting in the prep, but we acquired a company called Neon. And part of that story is like, hey, Databricks is pretty much in like traditionally like our DB SQL, warehouse is an analytic style warehouse, like a data warehouse. But now we're entering into this sort of transactional database, right? Like a literally Postgres, but with separation of storage and compute, but really low.
Maybe a pause point for
Yeah.
folks.
I'm trying to read what's
one
Neon.
thing that the data. Yeah, so yeah, that's what.
Yeah.
So data point for folks. If you follow Databricks over the years, they love putting the word lake in front of words, and so the latest piece of terminology that you need to learn, if Lakehouse was not enough for you, we now have a lake base, and so. When in parallel to Databricks is spending $1 billion on this AI company or that AI company, they acquired this funny serverless SQL company. I forgot, it was like Neon.
Neon,
right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, why do we? What is a lake base, and why do we care about lake bases?
So lake base, sorry, is what is the Neon product, but it comes back to your point, Leo. That's why I kind of went off on the tangent of these are databases that can be spun up literally in a few seconds, and they can be spun down just as quickly and scaled to zero. And there's a lot of use cases for Postgres, obviously, right? Like just transactional databases, kind of back every web app and things like that. But one of the important things that we saw about that is that agents love to use databases. As they're deciding how to solve a problem, and we're not being super prescriptive, telling the agent exactly how they should solve a problem, but to use the tools they have available. So there's a huge percentage of Neon and now lake-based databases that are actually spun up by agents.
So a question on that, and then I saw in the chat somebody was asking about MCP, so we should probably get to that in a second. But for the lake-based one, just like I just want to make sure that I'm understanding it. So what I saw before, and if you look at like MCPs used with a lot of agents and a lot of data workloads, one popular thing is either having, like, let's say pandas. So Louis will have pandas as data frames to get like a query result from your Databricks and work with it locally. But another thing that I see people do is, it's a little more awkward, just there's more indirection, but it's actually, there are other benefits, is they'll do like DuckDB or SQLite as a local database as an MCP. They'll create it on the fly, and so the agent locally has that database. And so if you get those big query results or your task, it can kind of go forward. But the I guess so my question is, like, I think the lake base gives you something that just doing a DuckDB locally or a SQLite locally doesn't do for you. So I don't know if you could, at least in a security mindset, like if you have an example.
I mean, for sure. Well, for one thing, it lives inside of the kind of security perimeter that you've already established for other parts of your data. It runs in the cloud securely. Has separation of storage and compute for Postgres, which is very unique. And so I think that you could potentially have multiple agents, even using that as a communication channel amongst them potentially.
Oh, like a chat room for AI agents, basically.
Yeah. So so I mean, I think there's as many use cases as we could sit here and think about, but I think there's a lot of benefit to having that.
So maybe it's so I can think of it as like, in your local coding agent, nowadays you use the local file system, and you can actually have local agents collaborate over the local file system. That's how a lot of it happens. And now if you're doing it in the cloud, what you're saying is like, it's cool. Yeah, you could do DuckDB or SQLite. SQLite's like literally like you can't do concurrent writes. While this, you're saying like, look, if you're in a team, an organization, you want to do that shared file system, you want to do that shared database. So the lake base unlocks that.
That's and really it's Postgres, and it's a lot of the contributors to the core contributors to Postgres were part of that team, and so it's standards based and widely adopted and understood.
And like everyone's vibe coding something now, and like we came to, I wouldn't say conclusion, but we mentioned this and discussed it in our last episode. Like, are we going back to the Renaissance era where the artist is the most important guy in the community, because now you have all the creative guys and girls being able to actually build what they imagine, like, and they have not been able to do this. Like 10 months ago, they couldn't do this, but now we're seeing like all those crazy ideas you have at 2 a.m. midnight after a couple of cold ones like, oh, this is a good idea, and suddenly that's a product. Is like, do you imagine like Neon? That's or yeah, that solution being like, oh, every vibe coded app is going to use that now.
Well, we think a lot of them are, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, yeah, vibe coding, as one thing, but I think, obviously the market we're going after, I think a lot of those folks would now call it, agentically engineered, and maybe in certain ways decidedly, less vibe, right, and more on the engineer side, and
Yeah.
how do we have certain assurances about where our data is, and how do we, experiment more quickly, and not feel like we're sort of retreading these paths around access patterns and access control, and just have that sort of all established so that you can be super creative against your data with AI. Yeah.
Yeah. And not worry too much of misconfiguring stuff. Like it's secure, like it's secure from the get-go.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, there's different threat, different threat models and different, things to watch out for. But I think starting from a place where like, hey, all my data is already under management, under access control, and I'm going to, establish my agentic workloads within that same perimeter is certainly a big, I won't say it's secure by default or anything. I'm not crazy to say things like that. But it certainly sort of addresses like some of the concerns, right, that you tend to run into when you're doing AI centric agentic stuff.
Yeah, maybe a way to rephrase that question a bit is like, it's kind of interesting for Databricks that you do work with some of the most regulated companies, and getting AI deployed safely there is super hard. So I don't know if you have like as you look at like like banks or anyone like that, or hospitals, as they do not just like a chat whatever rollout, but like an actual agent rollout, are you finding that there's certain things that make it easier with Databricks, like anything
well
specific?
I mean, yes, I mean, we don't, and I mean, we certainly have an agentic platform where you can deploy agents using any model, and iterate on those very quickly, and against your data. And that's, I think a lot of people think of Databricks as a data storage company, but the AI side of our business is over $1 billion a year run rate, and lots of classical machine learning agents, that sort of thing. But I think it's interesting to me because when I talk to security teams, some of them are like, hey, I want to use Databricks for security. I want to use it for my security data, but we actually have a lot more security teams come to us and say, hey, there's some other team in my company that wants to use your stuff, Databricks, and we need to sort of render a judgment on whether this is a trustworthy platform to put some of this extremely sensitive data. So I mean, certainly we have lots and lots of audits and practices and things like that have been established for a long time. But in addition to that, we have like an AI security framework that we've published, which is really technology agnostic, and it tries to just put some guidelines out there about, hey, here's sort of the categories, and then some of the specific risks that you face, and some of the specific controls. And because a lot of security teams are in a position to have a big sort of impact on whether or not their company embraces AI or not, right? And it's
I grabbed the pen at last year. I felt like a lot of the AI rollout discussion, people were still sort of in the RAG mindset, where it's like, okay, cool, you have put all your wikis into Databricks, expose it as a chatbot, like some vector storage, cool, and then some vector index, and then people would talk to it. But that was sort of a, then all of a sudden Claude Code comes out, everyone's coders are using agents, Clawbot comes out, everyone's actually connecting it to their email and like crazy stuff. Please don't do that. It's not obvious, don't do that. But especially if you're in a position of responsibility, don't do that. But I think last year when I asked people from Llama and Meta, like how do you keep the agents safe? Like, do you have any best like recommendations? Do you believe in like guard like prompt firewalls? And just in practice is just, oh my gosh, like it just and then all of a sudden now this year, like I think I was looking at the Unprompted conference earlier this month in San Francisco. There are a lot of talks on it, but I feel like right now nobody really is confident. Like obviously the vendors feel confident, but you don't like. But if you compare across vendors, it's all. I don't know. Like maybe from a Databricks view, like what I heard from you is like they're kind of like high level policies, but it's like, do you feel like this is going to be a thing that's rapidly evolving through the year, or you think you guys are like, okay?
No, I think okay. Like, you know, like we have an AI gateway where you can implement, you know, essentially prompt firewalling and just guardrails, you know, more generally. And I think that's critical. I do think actually my buddy Ryan Kovar, who works at a big financial now, he's actually.
Oh, he also was one of the bots.
We did bots together. Yeah, he's a dear friend of mine, but and you know, he works for a big financial and he does AI threat modeling all day. He's actually writing a course right now on you know, threat modeling AI systems. And so I do think that that's becoming more of a mainstream like security discipline, like start to understand that. Of course, you know, he's in the 0.1%, you know, with his employer. And so, you know, to what degree and how fast will that trickle down, you know, to most security teams, I think. But, you know, on the other hand, it's like AI itself is like such an accelerant for this kind of stuff. Like you could sit down for 2 hours, you know, and, you know, like really carefully, you know, prompt Claude to help you threat model, right? A new AI system. And so, you know, as the challenges emerge, then I also think there's a lot of solutions that emerge as well.
Yeah, I'm finding like a divide where I think the vibe coders doing local AI are kind of going in one direction, and like you kind of run fast. They might get more control and they might have a bigger sandbox, but it's still like a sandbox. But then I don't think it's discussed as much. But where I'm also bullish is the flip side, where I think places like Databricks, where you have like a controlled cloud environment, like I know OpenAI is trying to do their kind of stuff as well. I know definitely for Louis, we have an even higher level of security when we're doing like security teams doing analysis on forensic of like, you know, the core crown jewels where, you know, read mode and like all that and a lot more. So like, I think there's an interesting divide coming of the, but maybe actually flip it around. So you kind of, something you said earlier, like I wanted to dig a bit was, so, okay, you were talking about Databricks enabling AI teams securely throughout the organization. But what about use cases within security teams? Like, are you seeing that when teams go to you and your team on the security side, like, hey, how can you improve our security program? Like how we do investigations, vulnerability analysis. Like, are there some big themes of like agentic use of agents in security teams that you're seeing?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. You know, I mean, I think the first one, you know, like I kind of was joking earlier about, you know, cost of like data storage is like an early conversation, but then, you know, I would say some other like things that are common pain points are just like, you know, SOC staffing, right? And just having the right, you know, mix of, you know, the right number and the right mix of humans, you know, in your SOC. And, you know, so I think the natural question, and we're definitely seeing this reflected is, hey, how do I do triage with an agent? And I mean, I think triage is actually a fairly, you know, that's a fairly big one to bite off early. So I usually recommend like, hey, let's instead like decompose like what are the tasks that analyst does, right? There's almost always like a big part of that process that's enrichment, right?
Yeah, so, getting context, enrichment,
context,
everything. I think it was a couple of years ago. I think there was around RSAC, another vendor had a questionnaire for SOC analysts, where they're basically the top pain point for a SOC context.
Yeah, and it's so
context, you know, all over the place.
And even like back in the days when the SOAR platforms were becoming really, you know, coming, you know, to the fore and on the scene. And, you know, a lot of that story was like, hey, when the events are you know, come in, let's, you know, write a little playbook that does enrichment.
Yeah.
The funny thing about that is like, you still, you know, then you sort of said, okay, now I have to have a Python programmer to build this workflow. Right. And so, you know, you might still have a like a constrained resource that you're depending on in that case. And so, you know, I think to me, like enrichment is something that's really straightforward to get an agent to do pretty reliably. You can kind of narrow that scope, get good results, and it makes a big difference. I mean, if it can cut 10 minutes or 20 minutes of context gathering, like, okay, that's significant. And then, you know, when you start saying, hey, you know, do triage, it's like, well, you know, I think that's maybe, you know, that's an area probably where you need to start getting into more of like evals and things like that to train an agent like that, Leo, because it's too general to say triage this alert, right?
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. And
Actually, Dave,
I think that brings us to the next topic,
you might appreciate
actually.
Actually, Dave, you might appreciate this one. So it's sneaking a little bit from Graph the Planet, but to your point about the like triage and contextualization. So this is something I'd announced at B-Sides last week was, so before like we had, last year we announced we had basically the first AI agent to kind of get a passing score on Boss of the SOC autonomously. So this year we actually hit 100%.
Incredible.
And the reason is actually kind of what you just kind of alluded to, where we did an experiment where we said, well, instead of treating Boss of the SOC questions as tasks to solve and just doing them one-off, what if we just let the AI basically timeline and scope everything on its own? Just treat each question as the root of the seed of an investigation. Let it run for a few minutes. Just try to do timelining, the normal stuff that an analyst would have to do, that normal, like the SOAR era and Python era couldn't really do because it just sort of hit a ceiling and not know how to go further. So if you spend a couple minutes on that, what was kind of interesting was do that, not just contextualization, but full incident timelining, like full root cause going backwards, full timeline going forward from that seed. Then whatever questions you do after, it becomes almost like a RAG knowledge base. Like, yeah, the agent could do dynamic queries afterwards, but just bootstrapping whatever subsequent questions based off of that timeline. It was like, you know, all the questions get answered faster. It's like the completion rate, like literally 100%. Like I was just like, holy shit. Like we're ready for the next boss of the SOC,
yeah.
You know? Let's turn up the heat. So
yeah.
Use case.
No, I mean, there's so many comments there. I think, for one thing, like I'd be super interested to chat with you because there's other bad cyber stuff in those data sets that we never wrote questions for. Like we're like, hey, we'll write questions for this later when we need another question set. Right. And so I'd be
that's the big tease.
Super interested to hear about that. And we didn't talk about this. So this is the first time we're talking about this. Like Leo and I mean,
yeah. Okay. I've got some weekend homework.
The other thing I kind of like was joking about the bitter pill earlier. Right. But, you know, when you look at like the questions that were in Boss of the SOC is a, you know, Jeopardy style blue team capture the flag. That's intended to walk you through an investigation. And, you know, we wrote the questions sort of sequentially to walk someone through an investigation. So each question was intended to teach the participant like, oh, this is how I would now pivot to maybe some other kind of data, join things together. These are the investigative steps I might take. But, you know, that's just a couple of guys, you know, that's like Ryan Kovar, Dave Harold, James Brodsky, John Stoner, you know, from 10 years ago. Just kind of like saying this is how you should investigate this, right? But there's nothing to say that like that's the best way to investigate it or what. I mean, that's just some people who are, you know, like I happen to think, you know, I happen to like all those people, including myself. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing to say that is like the best way to investigate that scenario. So I'll be super interested, Leo, to kind of see your talk.
So I actually have a question here. We were kind of talking a little bit earlier about this. So for context for others, like one way that we talk about Boss of the SOC and other CTFs is they're nice, like bootstrap to, like, as Dave says, to kind of learn Splunk is created as an educational tool. It's actually a great educational tool for a vendor to get started, or like an AI SOC team to get started to prove out that their methodology works, where you just have a lot of, you know, there are a lot of like goodies in there for the AI to find, so you can prove it out. Great. But the reality is, as a team, whether you're tool building or you're deploying and you're going on that AI SOC journey, I don't care if you're Vibes investigating for doing like, you know, Claude Code with skills, or you're doing like full automation for like the triage we're talking about, or like pre-investigation with enrichment. I think there's like a sense of as a team rolls out stuff, you don't want to just like, you want to do vibe, like it's called like vibe evals, like, or there's like some informal term like that, where it's like before you do formal evals, you kind of start with just like, just make sure it works at all. But then eventually you need to turn it into a reliable and predictable process, right? And so, you know, you've been doing this for years. You created the CTF. You're very intentional about it. You've created these honestly one of the most realistic AI benchmarks in retrospect. Like wasn't, but like I guess your advice for like a let's say you're, you know, a SOC architect or like a SOC lead or whatever. You're planning out your AI SOC. You know, who cares about the vendor? Ignore the vendor. You have to control your evals, right? You have to control how you do testing. You have to control how you do quality, and you have to do it on a roadmap that like this quarter we do that, next year we tap to that. So I don't know if you have any like advice or kind of how should teams think about making AI SOC not just demoware, but like how do you do it as a predictable and reliable journey?
Yeah. Well, a couple answers to that. One is like for any agent, including you know, including AI in the SOC, if you will. But you know, we like in Databricks, we have, you know, sort of an agent hosting capability, and part of that is a big sort of play around agent visibility. So like we use MLflow, you know, MLflow 3, which kind of can give you sort of traces of the agent, you know, throughout its life cycle. So if you want to start optimizing cost or optimizing performance, optimizing, you know, latency or whatever, you know, it'll give you visibility, and you can start saying, okay, how do I, you know, improve that? How do I, you know, we do, you know, we can create, you know, fully synthetic data as well, which.
Well, just a thoughts point. You're saying the first step is you need to collect data and measure.
You need to have visibility, collect data, not security data, not your security telemetry, but telemetry about your agents, right?
Yeah.
And be able to measure, you know, over time and look for improvement. And, you know, I think that's the key. That's the promise of AI, is something, right, that we can improve, you know, over time, like continually make it better and better and better, right? So I think that you know, that's part of it. I think, you know, one thing that I started thinking about when you guys started doing your speed runs of Boss of the SOC is like, man, it'd be great if we had a lot more of that data and a lot more of those questions. And then I thought back to like, you guys would really laugh at how we created that data. I'm glad you kind of mentioned that it's realistic, because we went to just extreme pains to make that data set realistic.
Yeah, like I want to learn more about that actually, because like we presented at a conference last week, and basically we took a data set out of the University of Florida on seek logs, and like they had everything was scripted. So like every 5 hours, fire off something with a randomizer for like what second. So you can see like in the logs, you see spikes every 5 hours basically for when things happen. That does not seem to happen in your data set.
Yeah, I think you know, and that's common, right? And I you know, we've had data generation scripts that work that way.
Yeah.
You know, in the old days when you had a human analyst, they would notice, right? They would notice those patterns, and sometimes they would use those patterns to actually solve the questions, as opposed to what we were hoping they would use to solve it. And so, but certainly, you know, training an agent on something that has those characteristics, it's going to be, you know, it's not going to, you can imagine it's not going to be effective or as effective, right? And so, but you know, the way we used to
actually, in defense of this, it's kind of my timelining comment, right? It's like by letting the AI like root around before you have a more focused task, like letting it get comfortable with the incident so it could do more things after. If you look at real attacks, like if it's a kid like coming in after school every day, and that's the tell, that's legitimate, right? Like we should use every weapon we can get. You know?
Yeah, I really want to revisit the data I presented on NDC 2024.
Well, there's I mean,
saw some cool stuff.
Yeah, like command and control beaconing that's happening, especially when, you know, when it's trying to be evasive and not just, you know, being obvious. Yeah. We've had great use case. We have a great success with customers doing that with sort of classical machine learning models and looking for those kinds of patterns and things. And so, yeah, for sure, there's that. But if you're literally just replaying the data every, you know, few hours.
It's terrible.
So anyway, like this is actually what I'm going to be talking about at Graph the Planet is, okay, how do we take this thing that we used to do with literally a room full of people and we would have scripts, and we'd be like, you're a, Ryan Kovar, you're the marketing intern, and John Stoner, you're the finance director and whatever, and then James, you're the adversary, and we would take on those personas and do things. We would act like we're the people, right? Like going through our daily job, and we would chat in chat groups and do things in SaaS applications and generate local Windows events and all these things, and then the adversary would come in and do the attack, right? And those, it was great, right? Because there was no scaffolding to uncover, because it was literally people doing things. And so it's very realistic, but it also is like, okay, that's not something I can easily replicate.
And it takes some time
until like kind of now, right? Because now I can have an AI help me write a scenario. I can spin up a bunch of sub agents to take on those personas. I can have them take control of computers through browser control or computer control, and be the people, right?
Yeah.
And generate sort of my hope, my hypothesis at the moment is like, can sort of do as many of these as I want. And then when you're done, right, hey, write me a question set about that with answers, right? And then maybe like, hey, there's more, there's just more data to train on, right?
What's wonderful? Sorry, go for it.
Yeah, I see that this has a major this is another aha moment, like coming out as like a computer forensic background in the police. I know that training material for like, go look for stuff, that was hard, because basically they had to take a machine and boot it up every now and then, do stuff, blah blah, and keep a script of that. Having the ability to like just put a machine in the corner and an agent like executing stuff, creating processes, and like, hey, investigate what happened on this machine.
Cold cases.
Cold cases. I would love to. Yeah. That would have been so cool.
So we'll see. Like a lot of this is pure research on my part, and so a lot of it'll be sharing what I've learned and trying to do this. But I do think the goal is worthy. Like I don't think it's the only eval by a long shot. It's not the only category of eval data. I think Leo, you and I have talked about that, but it is one category. Maybe we can do something cool with it.
Yeah, I would definitely love to track that. If you maybe afterwards, if you share links for how to follow that work.
Of course.
One of the things that so I talk about evals so much. I could actually start using expletives when I talk about evals. It's like I feel very passionate about it. And one of the things I've started to appreciate recently is tests. The way to think about like test versus eval. A test is like, there's a known edge case that you just don't want to regress on. You want to do that bug fix, and you don't ever want to have to see it again, right? And so it's kind of like this exact case.
Yep.
Evals and models in general are about generalization. That like it's not an individual point. So we're trying to draw a line, and that if we see a new point and a new edge case we haven't seen before, hopefully that line generalizes that we've done. Right. And so for an eval, we don't want just that, hey, Dave generated this eval 3 months ago, version number 7. What we actually want is sort of like regenerative, that like every time I run this, that I could just turn that agent on, that digital twin on, and it could generate new attacks, or it could randomize logs a bit. And so that I'm working on the line. I'm not doing individual dots, and I'm not overfitting. So that sounds really.
No, I was thinking overfitting as you were, I think that's the danger, right? When you have too kind of few of these things and rely, and it's really easy to overfit, unless you're just constantly like trying to combat against doing it, at least in my experience. So I think that's another kind of case, more data.
Just so I'm tracking what you're talking about, like when I think about these eval systems, I think about two sides of it. One is, like the attacker, like are we simulating the attacker, but also the defense, are we simulating the defense, and like kind of do we have a digital twin of what the defender network is it even a live version? And then and so when you're talking about this, like let's say we're going working with a bank or something, one of the banks you mentioned earlier, and we're deploying what you're talking about, like what would we, is it like you take their existing logs and we'd use that, and then we get both new attacks and new simulated defenses on it, or what would we see?
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think if I was like an enterprise, a big organization trying to do this, I would want to mix in sort of my gold image, my standard build, like if you're thinking about endpoints, and including do you have CrowdStrike? Cool, like let's make sure CrowdStrike's on there. Whatever those controls are, and then a lot of times when I'm doing general data sets like this, we kind of do least common denominator things because so Sysmon is extremely popular in that way because it's pretty powerful and free. So you're not excluding anybody who's like, yeah, I don't have CrowdStrike or I have SentinelOne or whatever. It's like, well, okay, I'll teach you on this more general, certainly less capable, but more kind of ubiquitous tool set or something. So yeah, I think I would always say if you're using some of these techniques inside of an organization trying to tailor it, you should emulate your own controls. And there's a whole breach attack breach and attack simulation industry around doing control assessments and things like that. So
Dave, we're running a little low on time, but I wanted to make sure I get one more question in, and I wanted to go back to what you were talking about, like for folks starting to do a lot of this like agent stuff in Databricks. Yeah. So obviously kind of sometimes you want the latest and greatest model because you need the workhorse driving the investigation. Sometimes you're trying to do at scale stuff. And so it's more about having the most cost, like you want smaller models, but that you could do cost effectively at ridiculous scale. Yeah. And so, and I know like Databricks is like signing deals with like OpenAI and everybody else. And like, so when somebody spins up, like just like this is more like back on earth, like, all right, I make my Databricks account and then I'm doing an agent or whatever, cool, but just for the model, like, so what would I do in Databricks? And what would I do outside?
Like when you see Databricks doing these large deals with Anthropic and OpenAI and Google, what we're really doing is making all of their frontier models available inside of the Databricks platform. So your agent that runs, right next to your data, again, inside that same kind of perimeter, same access control, same governance. But you can just literally pick and choose which model you want to use, or you can use, we have a routing capability to say, hey, I want to route certain tasks to these reasoning models, spend more there because it's more important or more difficult.
So it's the latest model inside the Databricks perimeter. So if you've already gone Databricks through compliance, you're FedRAMPed or whatever.
Yep. Like, literally, Claude Opus 4.6, the latest, Gemini 3, the latest models, or any open source, or open weight model, and routing, dynamically between them as well. So, and even like classifying the problem as it comes in, and using AI to help do that routing. So yeah, and even if you're like, hey, I don't know how to build an agent. Like I don't really know what the agent SDK is. Like we have something called Agent Bricks, which is like a low code, no code way to like build your agent and even do, it'll help you generate eval data. Nice. We have LLM as judge, all these things, right? Or you can say, look, I know exactly how I want to build my harness. I want to use, LangChain, and I want to use Gemini or whatever. Like you can just do that as well.
And just so I'm tracking here. And then if I want to bring my own MCPs, for example, so somebody was asking about like AI red teaming. And so if I want to run my own MCPs on those agents, like, so that'll run on the Databricks compute, like locked down.
Yep. All the MCPs run inside that same kind of security perimeter. So, you're not exposing them. And, we have sort of like, service principal type auth where, the agent's always the same identity, or we have pass-through authentication where it's more what users behind that, and, all audited and all that. And so it does become like this really safe, accelerated place to try all these different, permutations of things, and certainly gets it, off of your, off of someone's individual computer where they're using Claude Code or whatever.
Yeah. Locking this stuff down is so hard. I guess, Cinder, like, I don't know if there's your side. Like, I know we're hitting the hour here.
Yeah. No, I think we could have gone for another hour, actually. So we're gonna have some good talks at Graph the Planet. So yeah,
I can't wait to meet you guys in person and see everyone at Graph the Planet.
Yeah. So for everyone that's followed along live or watching this down the road, I want to say, like, thank you for watching, and Dave, thank you for being here and sharing.
Thanks for
Yeah.
inviting me, guys. Yeah, really, always super enlightening. And thanks to all the viewers for spending some time. If you watch this, really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think
in the
also
comments
for,
of the video, I'll just add that. So like if anyone want to watch your talk on Graph the Planet or any of the other talks, like we've added the link in the comments, Louis AI, Graph the Planet. So sign up and learn more, basically.
And for the next interview on this series, I think we're going to be getting some of the Graph the Planet speakers. So go to our website, you'll kind of get a sense of who's next. And then on the Databricks side, I don't think it's been confirmed yet. So like we're still figuring out the details. But I think we actually will be having another a Databricks one, a little more on the graph side of the house, not just the security. So we're also figuring that out. So stay tuned for that one as well.
Yeah, and if anyone, and I think we can do that as well. If anyone watching has like, oh, you should get this one guy on, like he should be part of. Like, hey, we take suggestions.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, and come on by the Databricks Databricks booth at RSA. I'd love to meet everybody and say hey and start to explain how we're getting into security.
Awesome. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Dave.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.